that.
Yes.
It's like in charismatic circles, you have words of prophecy which are specifically to do revealing some knowledge about a person. So what charismatics do, they explain, they look at the phrase word of knowledge in 1 Corinthians 12, and they say that that's what that is. But there is no reason to believe that. Then there's word of wisdom, and they create something. But there's no biblical reason to attach the phenomena to that particular phrase. And in fact, there's a case for saying word of knowledge and word of wisdom are two aspects of Bible teaching. Right? Same with the Rhema and Logos. I hope I'm not losing people here. Same with Rhema and Logos.
I think about people, but I'm not quite sure.
I'm sorry. All right. But
Carry on.
Rhema and Logos. If you did a study, and I was just looking up some verses, but you will find, Rhema just means an utterance. It just means
that's right.
an utterance. If you do a study, I think you'll find that the words are often used synonymously with no difference. And what you're talking about is something that is observable and does happen, that you know, a part of Scriptures leaps out to, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if people want to call that a rhema, that's fine. But I don't know whether, I'm not convinced by the arguments I've heard.
Tell you what, Amanda, we'll go back and we'll do some more work on that. I love this program because it really gets me back to the Word of God again. So I have to say I haven't looked at that for a few years, but that's certainly when I looked at, because people were talking about a rhema word where somebody just stood up and spoke, and because they were recognized as a prophet or they were recognized as an apostle, they had a rhema word, everybody's got to accept it. I don't see it as that, but I did see it as part, as I say, of the Word of God that really the Lord wanted to bring home. But I will go back and do some more work on that. Give me a few days, and we'll email you a bit further on that, because obviously we slightly disagree on that. What clearly we agree on is it isn't something special that a man speaks out, and therefore it gives the words of a man something special with it from that point of view.
Yeah,
we're certainly agreed on that, and that's the way it used to be used, certainly from my point of view.
Just very quickly, Doug,
yes.
I've got a list of the times the word rhema comes up in the New Testament. Give you some examples. Man doesn't live by bread alone, but by every rhema that comes from the mouth of God. Every idle rhema that men shall speak. Now that's the basic meaning, which is it's a saying. But every word that proceeds from the mouth of God, well, that could refer to the entire Bible.
Well, I think, yes, you see, that to me, it's not just a logos, it's what God speaks out. But as I say, we'll go back, and if you want to do some study, and let us know on that. But we'll come back. It's an interesting question. I mean, one of the things is that Greek was a very rich language.
Yeah.
And of course, we do have this problem sometimes of trying to translate. There's one word in Ephesians chapter 4 about being tossed upon the sea. I was absolutely amazed to find that's one Greek word. And the only way it could be translated is literally by a paraphrase that is tossed around on the sea. And I thought, that's amazing that the Greeks have got a word that explains that. So sometimes there is a difficulty in really putting into words the Greek word, because they have all sorts of different meanings. But we will look at that from that point of view. Can I just move us forward a little bit, because I think there's still I want to get on in about certainly 5-10 minutes time to some of these ideas you have for people of getting good things out of Scripture. But can you tell us a little bit? We have this phrase that the council of this or the council of that approved these things.
Swansea City Council.
Can you tell us a little bit about this idea of councils? How special were they? Were they? Did they have some special remit from God? What was going on there in those idea of councils?
Okay, they are something and they are nothing, in the sense that as Christianity was emerging and forming, particularly when it became stronger and bigger, you'd have these diverse regions speaking different languages. The biggest difference would be Latin and Greek, of course. And gatherings of church leaders would take place, councils. And there are a number of key important councils which are widely accepted. I think there's 3 which are accepted by everybody, and then there's others which are accepted by different parts of the church. Like the most famous one, which comes up quite a lot, is the Council of Nicaea, which was...
Because they wrote the Trinity, didn't they?
Yeah, indeed. Well, you know, and there's so much myth being written about the Council of Nicaea. It is just preposterous, honestly. You know, some of these people need to be put in a room and hammered about the head with a history book, because they are twisting what is fact. This is not theory now. We know exactly what happened in these councils. Anyway, when it comes to the Bible, which is what we're talking about today, there was a council in AD 70, but it wasn't a Christian council. It was a council of Jamnia. It was after the fall of Jerusalem, and the Jews gathered to try and see how they could possibly be the Jewish religion without a temple.
Right.
And in that council, they happened to decide what were the books of their Bible, their Tanakh.
Really?
And it was our Genesis to Malachi.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's an important council, because it didn't create the Old Testament. It just recognised the Old Testament. And there were other councils later on. Do you know, I'm racking my brain to remember the council that formally ratified the 66 books. I can't remember now. It'll come to me in a minute. So there's something and nothing. What they do is, if you like, they mark an end point where there is no argument then. They weren't, it was rare for them to create anything new. They simply recognised what did exist. Like the Council of Nicaea wasn't seeking to create something new. It was seeking to defend the already accepted truth against a heresy that had arisen, which was that Jesus wasn't one with the Father.
Yes.
And he hadn't existed from eternity, you know. And it didn't create the Trinity. Right.
No. So in other words, there were things that happened in these councils, and they were men of renown in most of them, weren't they? I mean, they weren't just blokes off the street. They were people that had some degree of authenticity in what they were doing.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, we would do well to pay attention, and particularly evangelical Christians who are not from the more older type churches. You know, we tend to think that the life started in 1906 if we were Pentecostals. Yes. From my tradition, you think they started in the 70s when the house church movement got going, or if you're lucky, the Anabaptists, which is where I would trace my roots from. Well, no, it didn't. You know, there were Christians around a long time before then. Yes. And we would do well to pay attention to the Council of Nicaea. We would do well to have a look at the Chalcedonian definition, which is a bit of a tome, but it's worth looking at, because these were markers, for the most part, godly people, and many of these councils drew together Christians for sometimes the first and only time, many of whom had been persecuted. There's a story of Anthony, who Saint, they call him Saint Anthony, but these days, but his poor old battered body had been persecuted and beaten up many times because of his faith, and he appeared in the council, and you know, they all stood up and they clapped and cheered and whatever else they did, because these were momentous things. As the councils wore on, they became more Catholic, Roman Catholic.
Yes. So initially what we're saying is these councils did not write anything new. They actually came together and ratified what was being accepted at the time, isn't it? And I think that's the important thing that we need to understand with these things.
Absolutely. And particularly with regard to clarifications regarding the person of Christ and the relationship with the Father, all they were seeking to do was to clarify what was already accepted. And these heresies were emerging on different sides, and they tried to find a form of words which would unite around the centre, the core of the Christian faith. But for us, Bible-believing Christians, the earlier the councils, probably the more weight that we should, give them. They aren't the Bible, they don't speak with the same authority, but they do help us understand how Christians like us who did believe the Bible helped clarify things.